Good afternoon and welcome to Associated University, a group that was designed to provide supply chain management professionals with access to information on practical solutions concerning the industry's current hot topics. Today we will be discussing OSHA's new hazard communication standard and what you can do to comply. We have 15 minutes scheduled at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you may have. If you have a question during the course of the presentation or at the end, simply type it in the right-hand side of your screen in the question box. Additionally, following this webinar, we will be providing all attendees with a copy of this presentation. Your presenter today is Bob Forg. Bob has dedicated his career to ensuring the health and safety of others. With over 25 years of experience, he has served as a firefighter paramedic officer, a hazard material technician, a certified safety officer, a safety engineer, and is currently a member of the Chicago Community Emergency Response Team. Bob is also currently working as corporate safety manager for Associated. And now I will pass it over to Bob to get us started.
Thank you for attending our seminar. Our agenda today will be the overview and understanding of communications standard, how to comply with the standard, homeland security initiatives, best practices to reduce safety and security, supply chain management due diligence. Finally, I will close with how completing your due diligence and supply chain management can affect your overall approach and the new standard avoiding litigation and fines. Jumping forward, what is hazard classification? Hazard classification provides specific criteria for classification of health and physical as well as classification of mixtures. It communicates the potential hazards of chemicals and protective measures to employees. It's their right to know that we've known the HCS program. Now with the adoption of the GHS by OSHA, the right to know now incorporates the right to understand. The right to know and right to understand will be two new industry buzz statements with this new standard. How do we know and how do we understand begins with a little history lesson. The OSHA standard, known to many of us as HAZCOM, has not been updated since 1994. MSDS, or Material Safety Data Sheets, have been used as compliance with 1910-1200. The problem is that each known chemical may have several different types of MSDS sheets associated with it. Herein lies the problem that there is no consistency of data or hazards associated with that particular product. The GHS, or Global Harmonized System, also known as the Purple Book, is a combination of more than a decade of work by the United States and most industrialized countries throughout the world. These countries collaborate and make up Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, United Nations Committee of Experts on the Transportation of Dangerous Goods, UNCO. Other participants include the Food and Agricultural Organization, the International Maritime Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the United Nations for Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and of course the World Health Organization. These organizations have come together to emphasize the cradle-to-grave concept that we've all come to know for the chain of custody of all chemicals. The purpose of the GHS is to promote common, consistent criteria for classifying chemicals according to their health, physical, and environmental hazards, to encourage the use of compatible hazard labels, material safety data sheets for workers, and other hazard communication information based on the resulting classification. The impact is great. A harmonized and cooperative system for all regulatory intentions will lead to greater regulatory consistency among industrialized countries throughout the world. It will provide a recognized framework. Some government benefits are fewer chemical incidents, lower health care costs, improved employee, first responder, and general public protection, avoidance of a duplicating effort in creating national systems. Why reinvent the wheel? Reduction in enforcement costs, improved reputation of the chemical manufacturers and distributors both domestically and internationally. Chemical sound management. Benefits to companies include a safer work environment, and improved relations with the employees, thus creating a safety culture for both the employer and the employee. An increase in efficiency and reduced costs from compliance with hazard communication regulations, application of expert systems using expert resources, expansion of training programs, improve corporate image and credibility. Now the standard checklist that just appears on your screen, you should take your time and take notes on this. Write these down. The new standard was published in March of 2012. HCS, Hazard Communication System 2012, aligns itself with the Global Harmonization System. 12.1.13, employees should have been trained on safety data sheets or SDSs. Manufacturers and distributors must comply with all modified provisions. Distributors have till 12.1.15 to provide revised labels for all products shipped. After that point, all the products shipped shall have the new GHS label system. On 6.1.16, OSHA will begin its enforcement. So during this time, that's your grace period. All right, Max, I have a poll question. Has your organization met the required training by 12.1? On your screen, it'll launch, and you'll be able to answer. We'll give you a few minutes to answer the question. The answers are coming in. 59% have said yes, 16% are in the process, 3% have not begun, and 26% are not sure. Your answer to this should give you an indication of where you are with meeting the beginning stages of the new OSHA compliance mandate. The HS94 was a performance-oriented standard that provides guidance for defining hazards and performing hazard determination. The current HCS 2012 differs in that it does not specify an approach or format to follow. However, the standard has aligned itself with a globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, providing a uniformity-oriented approach for the classification and presentation through labeling and safety data sheets and hazard information. The GHS is the mandated format. If you can wrap your program development around the GHS format, then you will most likely meet the compliant mandates of the HCS 2012. All right, let's look at these definitions. Take a moment to read them. If you fit one of these definitions, then you are required to comply, subject to fines, imprisonment for failure to comply. As you read over the definition of exposure, or exposed from a liability standpoint, you can see the potential of litigation for noncompliance and or poor record keeping. Training is a key component of the standard, and the timeline for training employees has passed. From a supply chain management side, it is clearly evident that a foreseeable emergency can happen to anyone. Foreseeable emergency means any potential occurrence such as, but not limited to, equipment failure, rupture of containers, or failure of control equipment, which could result in an uncontrolled release of hazardous chemicals into the workplace. If an accident were to occur within your facility, are you prepared to mitigate it? Here's where the standard now can dovetail with an emergency evacuation and action plan. You will see the importance of this when we discuss security initiatives. Okay, some of the GHS, HCS key elements. Who must classify? Chemical manufacturers and importers are required to perform hazard determination on the chemicals they produce or import. Under the HCS, an employer that manufactures, processes, formulates, or repackages a hazardous chemical is considered a chemical manufacturer. So if your organization falls into this definition, you must meet the mandates of the classification procedure of the HCS and, of course, OSHA. Remember, the HCS covers chemicals in all physical forms: liquids, solids, gases, vapors, fumes, and mist. Now, before we go on, hazard communication needs to be fully understood. This training is pivotal in the building of a compliance program that will align with both the GHS and 2012 standard. With that said, let's look at what type of minimal training you must have completed by this date. As you can see, the HCS and GHS pyramid into a safe work environment with each layer of the pyramid relying on the structure it rests upon. I will now talk about each layer in a little more detail. GHS classification is if you're producing chemicals, you're mixing chemicals, you must classify those chemicals. Then you must develop your safety data sheets for your hazard communication. It becomes part of the risk management. Of course, then it becomes the safe use of chemicals. Health and environmental hazard classification. There's acute toxicity. Under that follows skin corrosion, serious eye damage, eye irritation, respiratory or skin sensitization, germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogenity, reproductive toxicity, target organ system toxicity, hazards to the aquatic environment. When speaking of physical hazards, HCS and GHS has defined explosives, the flammability, oxidizers, self-reactive, pyrophoric, self-heating, organic peroxides, corrosives to metals, gases under pressure, of course, water-activated flammable gases. Communicating the information can be communicated in several ways. Consistent phrases should be used to indicate the degree, severity of hazards across the different types. How we're going to communicate that, of course, is through labeling and effective HazCom communication training. Employees understand the new GHS standards. First of all, under labels, the chemical manufacturer, importer, or distributor shall ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals leaving the workplace is labeled, tagged, or marked. OSHA has not changed the general requirements for workplace labeling. Employers can either duplicate all the required information that is on the label from the manufacturer or create their own house labels as long as it meets the mandates of the applicable standards. Employers may continue to use rating systems such as the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association 704M system, or the Health Hazard Materials Information System, HMIS as we know it, as long as they are consistent with the requirements of the HCS and the employees have immediate access to the hazard information. Employers using the NFPA or HMSI system must train employees on the hazards of the chemicals used. The employer shall ensure that the workplace labels or other formats of warnings are legible and in English. Employers having employees who speak other languages may add the information in the employee's native language, but the information must be presented in English as well. Remember, the employer has an obligation to make sure the employee understands and comprehends the information, so language barrier is not a bar to non-liability. Under limiting label requirements, distributors of warehouse labels must stay intact with the SDS. You don't need a written program, but emergency response is still needed in the event there was a spill or exposure of the chemical. So your best bet is to go ahead and have a written hazard communication program. Now let's take a look at the labels. Here's what a typical USA label looks like. If you look at it, my chemical, warning, harmful is swallowed. Now taking that information, now we combine it, GHS label, you'll see product name or identifier, identify hazard ingredients where appropriate. You'll be required to have a pictogram, a signal word, physical, health, environmental hazard statements, supplemental information, name and address of the company, and telephone number which to contact. Now, here's a sample of the new GHS label. Take a minute to look at it. You'll see the pictogram. You'll see the chemical identifier up there. You'll see a signal word, danger. You'll see some physical health statements, first aid statements, of course the name and company telephone number as well. Moving forward, the key elements of these labels are the product identifier. This product identifier must be the same on Section 1 of the safety data sheets, which I'll go over in a few minutes. Product identifier is how the chemical is identified. This can be the chemical name, the code number, or batch number. The same information must be duplicated in Section 1 of the SDS sheet. The manufacturer, importer, or distributor can decide the appropriate product identifier. Next, we have the supply identifier. It shall include a name and address and telephone number of the supplier. Again, this goes back to the concept from cradle to grave. Chemical identity, a name that will uniquely identify the chemical. This will be a name that is in accordance with the nomenclature of the systems of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemical, or as we know it, IUPAC, and the Chemical Abstract Service, or CAS, or just a technical name. Highlighted in red are the global harmonization key elements incorporated into the new HCS standard. Now, there are currently 7 pictograms that you need to know. If you look and you see the environmental one, that is not required by under OSHA. However, it will be required by other agencies. Now, you can make your own labels if you have a red marker and black pen to reduce cost. But no, they have to be in the red triangular, and the pictogram with inside the red. Let's talk about each one by itself. Explosives. Again, you'll see the red triangular, one exploding bomb. These are to symbolize the explosives, self-reactives, or organic peroxides. The flame, of course, is flammables, self-reactives, pyrophorics, self-heating, emits flammable gas, also organic peroxides. You may have more than one pictogram on a label. Acute toxicity. This is a severe label and should apply on all labels that has acute toxicity tied to it. You have corrosives. A new one that we haven't seen is, of course, the exclamation mark. That is to symbolize an irritant, a dermal sensitizer, narcotic effects, or respiratory tract irritation. The health hazard one, you'll see with the exploding bomb on the human being, is there to indicate carcinogens, respiratory sensitizers, a reproductivity toxicity, a target organ toxicity, aspiration toxicity. However, there are a couple small guidelines here. You might want to take note of this. You do not use the exclamation mark when the skull and crossbones already appears on the label, or the corrosive already appears on the label. Most must have a red border, and this is used for domestic and international shipping. Now, with transportation placarding, chemical manufacturers, importers, or distributors shall ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals leaving the workplace is labeled, tagged, or marked in accordance with the HCS 2012 in a manner which does not conflict with the requirements of the Hazard Materials Transportation Act and regulations issued under the Act of by the Department of Transportation. So that means that on your shipping labels, you should also comply with the Department of Transportation labels. At some time, these will be phased out and it will be strictly HCS, but until such time, you must duplicate this system. And here's an example of such a label, combined GHS and transport label. Combining the GHS label requirements with the transport label requirements gives the optimized effect of identifying what the chemical is and the hazards associated therewith. Poll question. Take a minute, look at this pictogram, and respond to what it represents. Okay, 100%, very good. Correct health is the health hazard is symbolized by the red triangle with a human and exploding bomb. You guys are paying attention. Next, we talk about signal words that appear on there. Signal words were required. The signal word indicates the relative degree of severity of a hazard class and category. The only two words to be used are danger or warning. There may be only one signal word on a label. Danger takes precedence over warning. The intent is that people will heed to danger than warning. Remember as a child, if you saw the sign with danger, do not enter, you probably wouldn't enter. But if you saw a warning sign, you might think about it. Now, in the old system, we used to have danger, caution, and warning. Caution kind of fell in between danger and warning. Now, with the new GHS, we're only using two signal words, again, danger or warning. Remember, danger takes precedence over warning. Next, we have hazard statements. Hazard statements describe the nature of a hazard of a chemical, including, where appropriate, the degree of the hazard. Example, it causes damage to kidneys through prolonged or repeated exposure when absorbed through the skin. Note, all of the applicable hazard statements must appear on the label. Think like you're making a commercial and you have to list the side effects of all the drugs. The intent of this arduous task is that those who come in contact with the chemical are fully informed. Hence, your right to know, your right to understand. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Though hazard statements may be combined with where appropriate to reduce redundancies and improve readability, the hazard statements are specific to the hazard classification. And chemical users should always see that the same statement for the same hazards, no matter what the chemical is or who produces it. Moving forward, precautionary information. You need a phrase that would describe recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling. An example of this would be wear eye protection. It also states how to prevent an exposure, what to do in case of a spill, storage requirements, first aid measures, and proper disposal of the chemical. Safety data sheets, formerly known as MSDS sheets, chemical manufacturers and importers shall obtain or develop a safety data sheet for each hazardous chemical they produce or import. Now, before we talked about that on 12/1 of 13, you should have completed your training on the new safety data sheets and the pictograms. If you have not done this, again, I implore you that you get it done soon and move forward on completing the other standard mandates. The operative words here are shall and employer. If you are a distributor, then you meet the definition of the requirement to ensure that an SDS sheet is available. Now, OSHA does allow for electronic forms to the employee as long as it is readily available. The employer may maintain copies in other languages as well, but they have to make sure that the original safety data sheet shall be in English. What are some of the key points of the SDS? The SDS shall provide comprehensive information about a chemical substance or mixture. The primary use we use it is in the workplace and or shipping. Employers and workers use the SDS as a source of information about hazards and to obtain advice on safety precautions. Too often an employee may wonder how he's being exposed. The answer is you show them the SDS sheet, the safety data sheet, which now replaces the MSDS sheet. The SDS sheet has 16 mandatory headings, and they must be in a specific order. First is the identification, of course, the product identifier. Next is the hazard identification as part of your required label requirements. Third is composition on ingredients. Fourth is your first aid measures. 5 is your firefighting measures. 6 is your accidental release measures. 7, handling and storage. 8, exposure and control of personal protection. The SDS provides an important source of information for other target audiences. Utilizing the GHS system, both the employers and worker use it as a source of information about hazards. Next, of course, is 9 through 16 are your physical and chemical properties, your stability and reactivity, your toxicology information, ecological information, disposable considerations, your transport information, your regulatory information, and 16, of course, is for other information. However, you need to know that 12 through 16 are not required by OSHA, but is enforced by other agencies. The SDS should provide a clear description of the data used to identify hazards. These 16 headings are both required by GHS and the HCS 2012. All data, again, must be presented in this format order. There are no exceptions. Distributors shall ensure that the SDS is updated and are to provide other distributors and employers with their initial shipment and with their first shipment after SDS is updated. It is clear here to see that the liability can be extended down the supply chain. So if you're a distributor, have SDS sheets that arrive with your shipment, that shipment again has to be forwarded on to whoever you're distributing to. Again, it goes back cradle to grave concept. The employer shall maintain in the workplace copies of the required SDS for each hazardous chemical and shall ensure that they are readily accessible during the shift to employees. Again, electronic access and all other alternatives maintaining paper copies are permitted as long as no barriers to immediate employee access in each workplace are created by such options, meaning the employee has to have readily access to the information. Safety data sheets shall also be readily available upon request to designated representatives, assistant secretary, and the director in accordance with the requirements of 29 CFR 1910.1020. Okay, let's talk about Homeland Security initiatives. President Obama issued Executive Order 13650 to improve chemical facility safety in coordination with owners and operators in August of 2013. This order convenes many regulatory agencies with regulatory authority to further improve chemical facility safety and security within the United States. Such agencies included are Department of Justice, Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation. Next, Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards, otherwise known as CFAT. Identify and regulates high-risk facilities, ensure they have security measures in place to reduce the risk associated with the chemicals. Then you have the Department of Homeland Security Chemical Watch List. Chemicals that have known links to terrorist groups impose a threat to the public if a catastrophic event was to take place. How are best practices to provide that? Best practices to ensure safety and security is provide an effective training and information network. Streamline your information network. Have a detailed hazard communication program, an emergency response plan, a detailed security plan, as well as an electronic record-keeping system. Now, to wrap things up on our due diligence, we ensure that all employees have been trained regarding a new label system and safety data sheet format by December 1st, 2013. You should have already done that. Secondly, chemical manufacturers or importers, distributors, and employers shall be in compliance with all provisions no later than June 1st, 2015. That is when all labels must meet the GHS or HCS system. After December 1st, the distributor shall not ship containers labeled by the chemical manufacturer or importer unless the label has been modified to comply with the HCS system. The effect of all this will be an annual savings of $585 to $798 million. Most of it will come through increased productivity for health and safety managers and logistic personnel. OSHA predicts workplace injuries and fatalities will decrease by using this standardized system. A uniform safety data system and label accounts for between $16 and $32 million. In conclusion, GHS, Homeland, and global security measures will be the building blocks toward a safer, more secure chemical and supply chain management economy. Questions and answers.
Thank you, Bob. So now is the time we're going to open it up to everybody to ask questions. We've had a few come in during the presentation. You can type it at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You should have a question box, and you can go ahead and type in any questions you have for Bob in that side of the screen. We'll try to answer as many as we can before our session ends today. So the first one that came through, I am a distributor of food additives. Do I need to comply with the GHS and HCS 2012 standard?
That was a great question, and the answer is yes. Pharmaceuticals, food additives, cosmetics, and pesticide residues in food will not be covered by the GHS at the point of consumption, but must be covered where workers may be exposed in the workplace and during transportation.
We have another question that came in. Does any regulatory agency require me to do a background check on new or existing employees?
There are no regulatory standards that require background checks when working within government-restricted areas that require background. However, when working within government-restricted areas such as airports, yes, a complete background check. However, it would behoove any organization that deals with chemicals completing a thorough background on employees who will come in contact with high secure or high risk environments? My answer to that is I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Thank you, Bob. We've had a few other questions come through regarding copies of the presentation. We will be giving everybody a copy of the presentation following this webinar, so everyone will receive that. I had another question come in asking how did they confirm that they attended this webinar training. We'll also be sending you a certificate of completion, so both of those should be taken care of. That brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you again, Bob, for presenting this material, and thank you everyone who joined us today. We hope you found this information to be relevant and valuable to your organization. Again, following this webinar, we will be sending everybody a copy of the presentation along with a very short survey about today's webinar. We ask that you take a few minutes to let us know what you thought and offer any feedback on topics you would like to see included in future Associated University webinars. And thank you for attending and have a great day.